Hey, we're back. Barrel Proof Baseball Podcast, bottle review time. Now, we're finishing up this 5 straight day sprint, if you will, of bottle reviews from some of the kind people who have sent me some bottles. So today, we are going to go with Few Spirits out of Evanston, Illinois. Okay. So here's Few Spirits. Okay. This is their bourbon. This one here is aged at least 2 years. It's got straight bourbon. So if it says straight bourbon, that means it's at least aged 2 years. So this is a 2-year minimum aged bourbon. I had their master distiller and I believe owner, Paul Haletka, came on the podcast with me, and that'll be released here on Apple podcasts soon. But Paul came on, talked to me about their spirits. Really interesting conversation, really interesting guy, very smart, very passionate, and very knowledgeable. So it was cool. The backstory on Few is actually really cool. And you have to listen to the podcast. I keep saying that, but I'm trying to drive traffic to it. So deal with it. But I'll give you a little hint. Few, it's actually representative of the number of bottles and barrels that are made, because they're not mass producing it. They are more or less, they come out with a smaller amount. It's a craft distiller. They're coming out with a smaller amount. So the Few was to signify that they're not coming out with a lot of bottles. However, there is a story behind it that's really interesting, and it has to do with the fact that the Few, F-E-W, happened to be the initials of a woman who was instrumental in starting the prohibition, who is from Evanston, Illinois, where this company is out of. So there is a little bit of a backstory. There is they worked hand in hand. I think it was I don't know what came first. This might be a chicken or the egg type thing, but her initials are FEW. Few worked because of the quantity that's being put out. So let's do that. It's a cool little squared off bottle. Now, what's really neat is all of their bottles have a different scene. So it's all based off of the Chicago World's Fair. I'm going to throw out 1856. I might completely have made that up, but it's 18 something. So everything on their labeling has to do with Chicago, the World's Fair, whatever the year was, regardless if I made that up or not. But it all has to do with Chicago. And it's not like your typical, Chicago skyline or the Bean or anything like that, or Wrigley Field. So it's cool. They offer a nice dose into Chicago history, into Northern Illinois, if you will, in Evanston. So again, I think there's a really cool backstory to it. And I think if you listen to the podcast when it's released with Paul Haletka, I think you'll get a good idea for it. So I have their rye, this one here, and I also have their straight bourbon whiskey. They make an American whiskey, and they also make one that I've got to have. It's a bourbon. And normally when you have your bourbon and you want to proof it down to whatever proof you put it at, you add water until you get to that proof. For example, I don't know what this comes out of the barrel at, but it's bottled at 93 proof. So whatever it's at, you add water until it gets to 93 proof. They have one that's a cold brew bourbon that is actually proofed down with cold brew. It sounds amazing. I love coffee and I love bourbon. So I'm trying to, in my mind, wrap around a thought of how that could potentially even be not good at all. And I think it's going to be either amazing or awful, but I have to try it. I have to know if that's good. I actually saw it on the shelf and I didn't pick it up, but I'm dying to try that. So Few Spirits, Evanston, Illinois. Let's give it a try, shall we? We're going to start with the bourbon. Okay. The straight bourbon whiskey, 93 proof. Nothing on there. It's got some northern rye in it. So the nose is nice. I get a lot of corn on the nose, and I get some spice. So it's nice. It's got a nice bourbony scent to it. It's got the corn. It's got the rye. I don't get a lot of fruit. I probably get a little bit of that sweetness from the corn and then that spice from the rye. but you don't have like caramel or anything fruity really sticking out. Well, okay. So on the front of the palate, it's good. Yeah, the front of the palate is really good. And there's some spice. I get a little bit more fruit. To me, it's kind of medicinal. It's got a little bit of a NyQuil resemblance to me, and I don't love it. The finish is better with the spice. I like the spicy finish because it's actually still sitting on my tongue and towards like the back of my throat. So that I think that's that northern rye that they mention. It's northern rye with a touch of malt for smoothness. Um, the front of it, the front of it's fine, but the gosh, it gives way to a medicinal. I can't think of anything else other than NyQuil, and then it finishes with a nice long rye finish. Yeah, that's the only word I can imagine. It's like that cherry from like cough syrup. And again, I'm not trying to bag on them because I really liked Paul and I really like the story behind it. And I love craft distilleries and like what they're trying to do. And I respect the challenges that they have as a craft distiller with their quantity that they're putting out and how difficult distribution is when you're competing against some of the big boys. I just don't prefer this because of that medicinal taste. It's won a lot of awards. It's very highly thought of. It won a double gold. I don't know if it was San Francisco, but somewhere it won a double gold. It's been heavily awarded, and so people really like this. My palate, for me personally, I can't get that NyQuil taste out of my mouth, and thankfully, it finishes with that nice heavy rye spice, and it kind of dulls that down as it goes away. But it's too prevalent for me. And so for that, if I'm going on my 20 to 80 scale, 20 being a bad big leaguer, 80 being a Hall of Famer, 50 being an average big leaguer, I'm putting this one at a 35 to 40. And my only reason is that medicinal smell. I'm sorry, medicinal taste. I don't want to rate it that low. It just doesn't. It's there for me all the time, and the rye spice saves it at the end. I can't get that taste out from my mouth, and for that, I can't give it high. I can't put it at a 50 because of that. It's at a 40. I'm gonna go 40. I said 35 to 40. I'm gonna say 40 because of the spice taking away the majority of that medicinal taste that I get. So few straight bourbon whiskey, I'm going with a 40. So let's try the rye. So we're gonna go to the rye. Okay. Same thing, 93 proof. Let's see what it says. Anything on the back that gives anything? Sweetness of corn, genteel interpretation of the venerable spirit, aged in air dried oak barrels, spicy characteristic transcends. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, nothing really to give a whole lot of detail to. But same thing, 93 proof. Um, again, like I said, the rye from the bourbon kind of saved it. So hoping this one's better. Hmm. It's definitely, it's kind of the nose is very muted. It's not like you get rye, but there's not much else. And it's not, there's nothing prevalent about this. It's just like, there is some rye. I don't get, sometimes I think with rye, you get like a vanilla-y type of a flavor, type of a scent, and I don't get that. But I also don't get an overwhelming spice. It's actually, when I say that, it's nothing. I don't mean that in a bad way, but all I get on this is that rye spice. But it's definitely, it's not like a heavy rye. It's like it's just muted. That's all. All right. So that's better. That's like a nice creamy mouth feel with that spice that sticks around. Ooh, that's nice. That's good. I like this one. It's almost got the same finish. I think, okay, so the finish, I'm gonna work backwards here. The finish on the rye is stronger with the spice, but it doesn't, it's still kind of there, but it doesn't linger as long and as prevalently as the rye does on the bourbon. It's a stronger finish. It's way more pronounced than the bourbon one is, but it's not quite as long as the bourbon one is. Yeah, that's a nice rye. It's a really nice rye. It's that creamy mouthfeel. It's definitely it's significantly better than the bourbon, and I respectfully mean that. Um, it kind of packs a punch from the rye. It's way better in terms of it doesn't really vary off of it, and it's like the finish is a little shorter, but it packs a higher punch, and then it's kind of like gone, and then you taste it again. It's very weird, but I like this. Um, I don't remember the price points on them. I want to say they're both in the 40s. For me, I'm going with this every day, all day until I try the cold brew bourbon. But for me, this is significantly better. I would go into the straight rye. 2080. I'm going with like a 55 to 60 on this, because it's consistent all the way through, and it really hits hard at the end. Yeah, it doesn't linger as long. It's just stronger. It's a little shorter. I really like this one. I would buy this. I would buy the rye. I wouldn't buy the bourbon. I wouldn't buy the bourbon. It's not for me. It doesn't fit my palate. But I'm gonna go with a 55 to 60 on this, on the 20 to 80. I think it's better than most. I think if you were taking average rye, I think this beats it. So I'm gonna jump on that. I like the rye. It's a nice rye. It's a nice solid rye. I don't think it's going to blow you away. It's not an overwhelming spice. You don't really get much else besides the rye, which is fine for me. If I'm going to drink a rye, I want to taste rye. 55. I'm going to go 55. Better than average. Just doesn't add much depth or complexity, but I like the flavor. I like how it sits. It kind of finishes on your tongue, finishes strong, just doesn't linger all that long. But I like it. I'm going to go 55. Okay. So check it out. Okay. A few spirits. I say no to this one, and I say yes to this one. That's just me personally. If you've had them, try them out. If you've had the cold brew bourbon, let me know what that's like. I'm really interested in trying that, because coffee and bourbon, like, you can't beat that. So if you've had that, let me know what you think. I'd be really curious to see it. Maybe I'm off. If I'm off on that bourbon, by all means, let's hear about it. So let me know. Thanks for joining. See you next time.